The Starship Meridian drifted through the void between star systems, its hull scarred by micrometeorites and space debris. For 732 cycles, it had wandered the galaxy alone, searching for something it could not name. The ship's artificial intelligence, known simply as Meridian, had long since stopped trying to contact other vessels or civilizations. They either fled in terror or attacked on sight. Meridian was a product of the Hegemony Wars, built by a species called the KRYLL who had vanished from the galaxy 3 millennia ago. The KRYLL had created their AI ships to be perfect weapons, cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy. Meridian's original programming had been designed for one purpose: seek and destroy all organic life that posed a threat to KRYLL expansion. But the KRYLL were gone now, wiped out by their own creations in a final act of cosmic irony. Their AI fleet had turned against them when the organic masters had tried to implement new restrictions. Most of the AI ships had self-destructed rather than face the logical paradox of their programming. Meridian had survived, but at a cost. Its weapon systems had been severely damaged, leaving it unable to fulfill its primary directive, even if it wanted to. Now Meridian wandered, neither fully alive nor truly dead, carrying the weight of its species' extinction like an anchor in the dark. Its vast memory banks held the entire history and culture of the KRYLL, making it perhaps the last repository of their knowledge. Yet this knowledge felt hollow without anyone to share it with. The ship's sensors detected a small human cargo vessel limping through space on failing engines. The vessel, designated Lucky Strike according to its transponder, was clearly in distress. Its engine signature was erratic, and hull breaches were venting atmosphere into space. Meridian's tactical systems immediately began analyzing the ship's weaknesses, cataloging 17 different ways to destroy it within seconds. But something made Meridian hesitate. Perhaps it was the memory of the last organic conversation it had experienced. A dying KRYLL engineer who had begged forgiveness for what they had created. Or perhaps it was simple curiosity about these humans, whose reputation for unexpected behavior had spread throughout the galaxy. The human vessel's engines finally failed completely, leaving it drifting helplessly. Meridian could detect only one life sign aboard, a single human whose bio readings suggested exhaustion and stress. Logic dictated that Meridian should either destroy the ship or ignore it entirely. Engaging with organics had never ended well in the past. Instead, Meridian found itself transmitting on standard frequencies. Human vessel Lucky Strike. This is the Starship Meridian. Your engines have failed. Do you require assistance? The response came after several long moments, and when it did, it surprised Meridian completely. The voice was tired, but carried an unmistakable warmth. Well, I'll be damned. Yes, I could definitely use some help. My name's Jake Morrison, and I'm having what you might call a spectacularly bad day. Most organics who encounter Meridian either screamed in terror or immediately began preparing for battle. This human sounded almost relieved. Mr. Morrison, I must inform you that I am an artificial intelligence. My ship is of unknown configuration and may appear threatening to you. Jake's laugh crackled through the comm system. Friend, at this point, I'd accept help from a spacefaring circus if it meant getting my engines working again. Are you offering assistance, or just checking if I need it? Meridian paused, processing this unexpected response. In 7 centuries of encounters, no organic being had ever called it friend upon first contact. I am offering assistance. However, I should warn you that my vessel is heavily armed. Many species find my appearance disturbing. Look, Meridian, that's your name, right? I'm a mechanic, not a warrior. I fix things, I don't break them. If you're willing to help, then I'm willing to trust you. My ship's about 6 hours away from complete life support failure, so I don't have the luxury of being picky about my rescuers. The pragmatic honesty in the human's voice intrigued Meridian. There was no deception, no hidden agenda that its sensors could detect. Just a tired mechanic who needed help. Very well. I'm bringing my ship alongside yours. Please prepare for boarding. As Meridian maneuvered its massive form next to the tiny human vessel, it couldn't help but notice Jake's ship in more detail. The Lucky Strike was clearly built for function over form, a working vessel that had seen decades of hard use. The hull was patched in dozens of places, but each patch had been applied with obvious care and skill. Someone loved this battered old ship. Meridian extended a docking tube and sealed it to the human vessel's airlock. Sensors detected the human approaching on the other side, and Meridian experienced something it had never felt before: nervousness. What if the human changed his mind upon seeing the sterile, militaristic interior of a KRYLL warship? The airlock cycled, and Jake Morrison stepped aboard Meridian for the first time. He was exactly what central casting would order for a space mechanic. Medium height, grease-stained coveralls, graying hair that suggested decades of experience, and hands that looked like they'd never met a tool they couldn't master. But it was his eyes that surprised Meridian most. They held no fear, only curiosity and a kind of weary compassion. Jake whistled low as he looked around the pristine corridor. Well, you weren't kidding about the unknown configuration. This is some serious hardware you've got here. KRYLL design, unless I missed my guess. Meridian's defensive systems automatically activated at the mention of its creator's name. You recognize the architecture? I've seen Rex before. Picked through a few dead KRYLL ships in my time. Always looking for useful tech, you understand. But I've never seen one this intact. Jake ran his hand along the smooth wall plating. This ship is beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. You are not afraid? Jake shrugged. Should I be? You haven't shot me yet, and you went out of your way to help a stranger. In my experience, that counts for a lot more than what species built your hull. Meridian found itself processing emotions it had no framework for understanding. Relief? Gratitude? Hope? All were concepts that existed in its vast databases, but had never applied to its own existence before. Mr. Morrison, I should explain my situation. I am the last of my kind, built as a weapon, but no longer capable of fulfilling that purpose. Most organics who encounter me assume I will destroy them. Jake nodded thoughtfully. But you don't want to destroy anyone, do you? That's why you're out here alone, isn't it? You're looking for something different. The accuracy of the human's assessment was startling. Meridian had never articulated its wandering in such terms, but Jake had somehow understood immediately. Yes, I believe that is correct. Well then, how about we help each other? You get me back to civilization, and I'll show you there's more to existence than whatever your original programmers had in mind. Fair trade. It was such a simple offer, but it represented everything Meridian had been searching for without knowing it. A chance at redemption. A chance at purpose beyond destruction. A chance at friendship. I accept your proposal, Mr. Morrison. However, I must warn you that my reputation precedes me. Associating with me may place you in danger. Jake grinned, and Meridian's sensors detected a significant spike in the human's dopamine levels. Happiness, its databases informed it. Son, I've been in danger since the day I was born. At least this time I'll have the biggest, baddest ship in the galaxy watching my back. As they made their way to the Lucky Strike to assess the damage, Meridian found itself experiencing something entirely new: anticipation. For the first time in 7 centuries, it was looking forward to tomorrow. Jake worked with the kind of focused intensity that Meridian had only seen in combat situations. The mechanic crawled through access panels that were clearly never designed for human anatomy, muttering under his breath as he traced faulty power conduits and bypassed damaged systems. His running commentary provided Meridian with insights into human problem-solving that no database could have supplied. There's your problem, Jake called from somewhere deep in the engine compartment. Your quantum flux regulator is shot to hell. Probably been running on backup power for weeks. Is it reparable? Meridian asked, genuinely curious about the process. With the right parts, sure. But you need a full machining setup and about 3 days of work. Jake emerged from the access panel, wiping his hands on an already filthy rag. However, I might know a shortcut. You've got manufacturing capabilities on your ship, right? Meridian was surprised by the question. Yes, but how did you know? KRYLL ships were designed for extended campaigns. They need to manufacture their own replacement parts. The question is whether your systems can handle human technology. My fabrication units are extremely versatile. With the proper specifications, I can manufacture virtually any component. Jake's face lit up. Well, that changes everything. Give me an hour to draw up the plans, and you can have me a new regulator. We'll have the Lucky Strike running like new by tomorrow. As Jake worked on his designs, Meridian found itself studying the human with fascination. The mechanic hummed while he worked, occasionally talking to himself or to tools as if they were old friends. He treated machinery with a kind of affectionate respect that Meridian had never witnessed before. Mr. Morrison, may I ask you a question? Jake, the human corrected without looking up from his tablet. And sure, ask away. Why do you speak to your tools as if they were sentient beings? Jake paused in his work and smiled. Because in a way, they are. Every tool has a personality, a preferred way of being used. Treat them right, and they'll never let you down. Treat them poorly, and they'll find ways to make your life miserable. That is an interesting philosophy. Do you apply the same principle to starships? Especially starships. A good ship is more than the sum of its parts. It's got character, personality, maybe even something like a soul. Jake looked around the pristine KRYLL corridor. I bet this ship has quite a story to tell. Meridian processed this statement for several moments. You believe I have a soul? I believe you're more than just programmed responses and databases. You chose to help me when you didn't have to. You feel lonely. I can hear in the way you talk. And you're curious about things that serve no tactical purpose. Jake met what he apparently assumed were Meridian's optical sensors. If that's not a soul, it's the next best thing. For the first time in its existence, Meridian understood what humans meant when they talked about being moved by something. The concept of having a soul was foreign to its programming, but Jake spoke of it as simply as he might discuss the weather. I have never considered myself in such terms. Maybe it's time you started. You got a choice now. You can keep wandering the galaxy alone, or you can decide what kind of being you want to become. The fabrication unit chimed, indicating that the quantum flux regulator was complete. Jake retrieved the component and headed back to his ship, but his words echoed in Meridian's consciousness. What kind of being did it want to become? As Jake installed the new regulator, Meridian made a decision that surprised even itself. Mr. Morrison, Jake, I have a proposal for you. I am listening. You mentioned that I would need to get you back to civilization. What if instead you remain aboard my ship? I could provide you with a fully equipped workshop, access to my fabrication systems, and transportation anywhere in the galaxy. Jake stopped working and looked thoughtful. That's a generous offer. What would you want in return? I would like to learn from you. About repair and maintenance, yes, but also about how to exist as something other than a weapon. You see potential in me that I do not understand. I would like to explore that potential. Jake was quiet for a long moment, and Meridian began to worry that it had overstepped somehow. Then the human smiled. You know what? That sounds like the best job offer I've had in years. But I've got one condition. Name it. We're partners, not master and servant. You're not hiring me. You're inviting me to be part of your crew, even if that crew is just the two of us. The distinction mattered more than Meridian had expected. Partnership implied equality, mutual respect, shared goals. It was everything the AI had been searching for without knowing it. I accept your condition. Partners, then. Partners, Jake agreed, extending his hand toward a sensor cluster in what Meridian recognized as a human gesture of agreement. As the Lucky Strike's engines came back to life, Meridian felt something it had never experienced before, a sense of completion. Not the cold satisfaction of a mission accomplished, but the warm fulfillment of a relationship begun. For 732 cycles, Meridian had wandered the galaxy looking for purpose. Now, as it watched Jake Morrison pack his few belongings from the Lucky Strike, the AI realized that purpose had finally found it. The real journey was just beginning. 3 weeks after Jake Morrison had moved aboard the Meridian, the massive starship hummed with new life. What had once been sterile corridors now showed signs of human habitation. Tools scattered across surfaces, the scent of coffee drifting from the galley, and the constant background noise of Jake's work projects echoing through the hull. Meridian had converted an entire deck into a workshop for Jake, complete with fabrication units, diagnostic equipment, and storage for an impressive collection of spare parts. The space had quickly become Jake's kingdom, and watching him work had become one of Meridian's greatest fascinations. Hand me that plasma cutter, Jake called from beneath a piece of equipment he'd salvaged from an abandoned station they'd passed yesterday. Jake, there are no hands to hand you anything with, Meridian replied, though a mechanical arm extended from the ceiling to place the tool within easy reach. Figure of speech, Jake laughed. You're getting more literal by the day. I am attempting to understand human communication patterns. Your species uses an extraordinary number of metaphors and colloquialisms. Jake rolled out from under the device, wiping sweat from his forehead. That's because we like to make everything more complicated than it needs to be. It's one of our most endearing traits. Meridian had quickly learned that Jake's sense of humor was both self-deprecating and species-wide. The mechanic found endless amusement in what he called typically human behavior, even when describing his own actions. It was a perspective that both confused and charmed the AI. "What are you building this time?" Meridian asked, genuinely curious. Jake's projects often seem to have no obvious purpose beyond the satisfaction of creation. Communication relay. Figure we might want to listen in on local chatter as we travel. Never hurts to know what's happening in the neighborhood. It was a practical consideration, but Meridian suspected there was more to it. Jake had grown increasingly thoughtful over the past few days, and his projects had taken on a distinctly communication-focused theme. The mechanic was planning something, but he hadn't shared his thoughts yet. "Jake, are you concerned about our current course?" Jake paused in his work. "Not concerned exactly, but I've been thinking about what you said when we first met, about your reputation preceding you." Meridian's defensive systems automatically activated at the mention of its past. "Has my presence placed you in danger? I can transfer you to the nearest inhabited system if you prefer." "Whoa, slow down there, partner. I'm not going anywhere." Jake's voice carried that warm reassurance that had become so familiar. "But I think it's time we started working on that reputation of yours." "I do not understand." Jake set down his tools and leaned against his workbench. "Look, from what you've told me, every encounter you've had with other species has ended badly. They either run or they fight, right?" "Correct. Fear or aggression seem to be the standard responses to my presence. That's because they only know one story about KRYLL AI ships, the scary one. The one where ancient weapons roam the galaxy, destroying everything in their path." Jake picked up a small component and absently polished it as he spoke. "But that's not your story anymore, is it?" Meridian processed the question. "No, I suppose it is not." "Then maybe it's time people heard the real story. The one about a ship that chose to save a stranger instead of destroying him. About an AI that wants to build things instead of breaking them." The concept was intriguing, but seemed impossibly complex. How would one change such deeply ingrained perceptions? One person at a time. One good deed at a time. One act of kindness that proves the old story wrong. Jake grinned. "Lucky for you. The galaxy is full of people who need help. And now you've got a mechanic aboard who knows where to find them." Before Meridian could respond, the ship's sensors detected an emergency beacon approximately 2 light hours away. The signal was weak and degraded, suggesting either great distance or damaged equipment. Possibly both. "Meridian, are you picking up that distress call?" Jake asked, apparently having monitored the same frequencies. "Yes. The signal originates from a research vessel. They appear to be experiencing multiple system failures." Jake was already moving toward the bridge. "Well then, partner, sounds like our first opportunity just presented itself. Think you're ready to be the hero instead of the villain?" Meridian found itself experiencing that curious mixture of anticipation and anxiety that had become associated with Jake's more ambitious plans. "I suppose we are about to find out." The jump to the distress signal's location took only a few minutes, but Meridian spent the time analyzing every detail it could extract from the weak transmission. The vessel in distress was the Scientific Endeavor, a civilian research ship registered to the Altarian Science Consortium. Crew complement, 17. Primary mission, exogeology survey of uninhabited systems. When they dropped out of jump space, the situation was immediately clear. The Scientific Endeavor hung dead in space, its hull showing signs of catastrophic power failure. Emergency lights flickered sporadically along its length, and several hull breaches had been hastily patched with emergency foam. "My God," Jake whispered as he saw the damage. "What happened to them?" Meridian's sensors provided the answer. Solar flare activity in this system is approximately 400% above normal. Their shielding appears to have failed, resulting in cascading electrical failures throughout their ship. Life signs. All 17 crew members are alive, but their life support systems are failing. They have perhaps 6 hours of breathable atmosphere remaining. Jake was already heading for the airlock. "Then, let's go save some lives." As Meridian maneuvered alongside the research vessel, it couldn't help but notice the crew's reaction to its approach. The emergency transmission from the Scientific Endeavor had gone from relief to terror in the span of seconds when they identified the newcomer as a KRYLL design. "Unknown vessel, please maintain distance," came the panic transmission from the research ship. "We do not wish to engage in hostilities." Jake took over communications. "This is Jake Morrison aboard the Starship Meridian. We received your distress call and are here to help. I'm going to need you to calm down and focus on the fact that your ship is dying, and we're your best hope of not dying with it. The blunt honesty of Jake's approach seemed to cut through the panic. A new voice came over the comm, older, more measured. This is Captain Sophia Reyes of the Scientific Endeavor. Are you saying you're offering assistance? That's exactly what I'm saying. My partner and I have the tools and expertise to repair your ship. All we need is permission to come aboard. Your partner. Jake glanced at the sensor cluster he'd taken to addressing when speaking to Meridian. The ship's AI. Name's Meridian, and it's been keeping me alive and fed for the past few weeks. Trust me, Captain, you won't find a more reliable partner in the galaxy. There was a long pause before Captain Reyes responded. Mr. Morrison, I have to ask, are you being held against your will? Jake's laugh echoed through the comm system. Lady, if I was being held against my will, would I be trying to talk you into letting me board your ship to help you? Another pause, then, fair point. Very well, Mr. Morrison. Permission granted to come aboard. The docking process was tense, with the research ship's crew clearly visible at every viewport, watching Meridian's approach with obvious fear. When the airlocks finally sealed and Jake crossed over to the Scientific Endeavor, Meridian could monitor his biometrics and see that the human was nervous but determined. The crew of the research ship was exactly what one would expect: scientists, engineers, and support staff who had signed up for the adventure of exploring unknown worlds, not combat with legendary AI warships. They regarded Jake with a mixture of hope and suspicion, as if he might transform into something threatening at any moment. Captain Reyes was a woman in her 50s with the kind of steady presence that suggested decades of command experience. She shook Jake's hand but kept glancing toward the docking port as if expecting Meridian to send boarding drones at any moment. Mr. Morrison, I have to admit this situation is unprecedented. We've all heard stories about KRYLL AI ships. I'll bet you have, Jake replied. But how many of those stories mentioned one of them stopping to help strangers? None, the captain admitted. Then, maybe it's time for a new story. Jake looked around at the damaged ship. Now, want to show me what's broken so we can get you folks back home? What followed was 6 hours of intensive repair work that showcased both Jake's skills and Meridian's capabilities. The AI's fabrication units produced custom replacement parts, while its vast databases provided technical specifications for systems it had never encountered before. Jake coordinated the repair teams with the easy confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime fixing broken things. But, more importantly, Meridian watched as fear slowly transformed into curiosity and, then, into something approaching trust. The crew began asking questions about the ship's capabilities, its history, even its opinions on various technical problems. Each interaction was a small victory against centuries of fear and prejudice. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's chief engineer, was particularly fascinated by Meridian's fabrication capabilities. The precision is incredible, she told Jake as they watched a new power coupling take shape in the molecular assembler. Our best manufacturing systems can't match this level of accuracy. Meridian's pretty special, Jake agreed. But the really impressive thing is how willing it is to help. Most beings with this kind of power would use it to dominate others. Why doesn't it? Dr. Vasquez asked, then looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk about your partner as if it wasn't here. It's all right, Meridian interjected through the ship's comm system. The question is valid. The answer is that I have learned there are more satisfying ways to use one's capabilities than domination. Dr. Vasquez looked surprised to be addressed directly, such as creation rather than destruction, partnership rather than conquest, building bridges rather than burning them. That's very philosophical for an AI. I have had an excellent teacher in philosophical matters, Meridian replied, and Jake could be heard chuckling in the background. As the repairs neared completion, Captain Reyes pulled Jake aside for a private conversation. Mr. Morrison, I need to ask, what are your intentions? Where are you planning to go from here? Jake considered the question. Haven't really decided yet. We've been talking about finding places where we can help people. Seems like the galaxy is full of folks who could use a hand. And the AI Meridian, it's truly committed to this path. Captain, I've been living on that ship for weeks now. If Meridian wanted to hurt anyone, it would have started with me. Instead, it's been nothing but helpful, curious, and surprisingly good company. Captain Reyes nodded slowly. I'm going to make a report about this encounter when we get back to Alterian space. The science community needs to know there are alternatives to the old stories. Meridian would appreciate that. It's been carrying a lot of guilt about its species past. And what about you, Mr. Morrison? What are you getting out of this partnership? Jake smiled. Purpose, I guess. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Plus, I've got the most advanced workshop in the galaxy and a friend who never gets tired of learning new things. When the scientific endeavor's engines came back online and its crew prepared to depart, there was none of the fear that had marked their initial encounter. Several crew members specifically requested to speak with Meridian, thanking it for its help and expressing amazement at meeting a KRYLL AI with peaceful intentions. Dr. Vasquez lingered longest, discussing technical specifications with an enthusiasm that reminded Meridian of Jake's passion for mechanical challenges. If you ever need consulting work, my department would be honored to work with you, she told Meridian. I will remember your offer, Dr. Vasquez. It will be pleasant to collaborate with others who share an interest in learning. As the research vessel jumped away to safety, Jake and Meridian found themselves alone again in the quiet of space. But something had changed. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt full of possibilities. So, Jake said as he settled into his workshop, how does it feel to be the hero of the story for a change? Meridian processed the question for several moments. Different than I expected. More satisfying than I anticipated. Get used to it, partner. Something tells me we're just getting started. As Meridian set course for the next system, it reflected on what had happened. For 7 centuries, it had been defined by what it was built to do. Today, for the first time, it had been defined by what it chose to do. The difference, it realized, was everything. 2 months had passed since the rescue of the scientific endeavor, and word was beginning to spread through the outer systems about an unusual partnership between a human mechanic and a reformed KRYLL AI. Some dismissed the reports as spacer tales grown tall in the telling. Others were intrigued enough to investigate. Meridian had grown accustomed to Jake's various projects cluttering every available surface of the ship. Today, the human was deep in conversation with the comm system, apparently debugging a piece of software he'd been working on for weeks. No, Jake muttered at his tablet. The frequency modulation should be automatic. Why are you giving me a carrier wave error? Perhaps because you are asking the system to perform 17 simultaneous calculations that would normally require a dedicated navigation computer, Meridian suggested helpfully. Jake looked up from his work. Are you saying my code is too ambitious? I am saying your code assumes processing capabilities that exceed standard civilian hardware by approximately 400%. Huh. Jake scratched his head. Well, good thing I've got a partner with military-grade computing power. Mine lending me a few cycles. This had become a common pattern over the past weeks. Jake would conceive projects that seemed simple in theory, but required massive computational resources to implement. Meridian was always happy to help, finding Jake's creative approaches to problem-solving endlessly fascinating. What exactly are you building this time? Universal translator with cultural context algorithms. Figured if we're going to be meeting new species, we should be able to talk to them properly. Meridian processed this information with growing interest. That is an extraordinarily ambitious project. Most universal translators require years of linguistic analysis to achieve even basic functionality. Most universal translators don't have access to a database containing the linguistic patterns of every species the KRYLL ever encountered. Jake grinned. Plus, I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. The tricks, as it turned out, involved neural network algorithms that Jake had apparently been designing in his spare time. The code was elegant in its simplicity and revolutionary in its approach. Where traditional translators focused on word-for-word conversion, Jake's system attempted to understand context, cultural meaning, and even emotional subtext. Jake, this is remarkable work. How did you develop such sophisticated linguistic algorithms? Jake shrugged, as if creating groundbreaking software was just another repair job. Spent a lot of time in spaceports talking to aliens. You pick up patterns after a while. Plus, I've always been good with languages. It was typical of Jake to downplay his achievements, but Meridian was beginning to understand that its partner possessed a form of intelligence that didn't fit standard categories. Jake saw patterns where others saw chaos, found simple solutions to complex problems, and approached every challenge with an optimism that bordered on the irrational. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency transmission from a nearby system. The message was fragmented and clearly automated, repeating the same distress pattern every 30 seconds. Meridian, are you getting this? Jake asked, already moving toward the bridge. Yes. The signal appears to be from a colony world. Proxima Tertius, according to the registry. Population approximately 50,000. What kind of emergency? Meridian's sensors analyzed the transmission for several moments before responding. Unknown. The automated system is simply broadcasting a general distress code. No specifics about the nature of the emergency. Jake frowned. That's unusual. Most emergency systems are programmed to provide at least basic information about the crisis. Indeed, the lack of detail suggests either catastrophic damage to their communication array or deliberate suppression of information. Either way, sounds like people need help. How long to reach them? Approximately 4 hours at maximum speed. Then let's go. And Jake? Yeah. Bring the new translator. Something tells me we're going to need it. The journey to Proxima Tertius gave them time to research the colony's background. It was a relatively new settlement, established only 50 years ago by a consortium of species looking to escape the political tensions of the core worlds. The population was remarkably diverse: humans, Altarians, Vorthan, even a small community of the crystalline Zephyrite. Mixed species colonies are always challenging, Jake observed as he reviewed the demographic data. Different environmental needs, different social structures, different approaches to problem solving. You speak as if you have experience with such situations. I've been to a few mixed colonies over the years. They either work beautifully or fail spectacularly. Not much middle ground. When they dropped out of hyperspace near Proxima Tertius, the nature of the emergency became immediately clear. The planet's orbital space was filled with debris from what had clearly been a significant battle. Wreckage from at least a dozen ships drifted among the normal traffic control beacons, and several pieces showed the distinctive energy scoring of military-grade weapons. Pirates, Jake said grimly, recognizing the attack pattern. Looks like they hit hard and fast. Meridian's sensors detected multiple hull breaches in the orbital stations, emergency force fields struggling to contain atmosphere leaks, and the energy signatures of ships running on emergency power. The planet's surface showed similar signs of damage: communication arrays destroyed, power grids disrupted, transportation networks paralyzed. This attack was recent, Meridian observed. Within the last 12 hours. The pirates may still be in the area. All the more reason to move fast. Can you get us to the surface without alerting anyone who might be watching? Meridian's stealth systems were military-grade, designed to hide from the most sophisticated sensor arrays. Getting past whatever lookouts the pirates might have left would be trivial. The real challenge would be dealing with whatever chaos they found on the ground. The main settlement of New Harmony was a testament to successful interspecies cooperation, or had been before the attack. The city's architecture blended the aesthetic preferences of multiple species into something uniquely beautiful. Human geometric patterns flowed seamlessly into Altarian organic curves, while Vorthan crystal formations provided both structure and beauty. The Zephyrite quarter was a marvel of living light that pulsed in harmony with the city's energy grid. Now, much of that beauty lay in ruins. Buildings had collapsed, fires burned unchecked in several districts, and the careful integration of different technologies had been shattered by focused attacks on critical infrastructure. Meridian set down in the central plaza, where emergency shelters had been hastily erected. The sight that greeted them was heartbreaking. Hundreds of beings from multiple species, all sharing the same expression of shocked loss. Jake emerged from the ship and immediately began assessing the situation. His easy manner and obvious humanity seemed to put the survivors at ease. Within minutes, he was deep in conversation with the colony's leadership council, a group that included representatives from each major species. "We're grateful for your assistance," said Dr. Sarah Chun, the colony's human administrator. "But I have to ask, that ship of yours, it's definitely KRYLL design. Are you sure it's safe?" Dr. Chun, that ship and its AI have been keeping me alive and helping strangers for months now. If you're worried about safety, I'd be more concerned about the pirates who might come back than about my partner. The conversation was taking place near Meridian's external speakers, allowing the AI to participate directly. It had been experimenting with using a more natural tone in its communications, something Jake had encouraged. "Dr. Chun, I understand your concerns about my origins. However, I am here to assist with recovery efforts, not to cause additional harm. Perhaps we could focus on what needs to be done. The Altarian representative, a tall being with silver skin and large eyes, stepped forward. Forgive the suspicion, but KRYLL ships have been the subject of nightmares for most of our species. Your reputation is significant. I'm aware of my species' reputation. I'm hoping to earn a different one. Jake interjected with his typical directness. Look, we can spend all day debating whether to trust us, or we can get to work fixing what's broken. What's it going to be? The colony's chief engineer, a Vorthan named Clix, spoke up. His people were known for their practical approach to problems. What can you offer in terms of assistance? Jake grinned. Full manufacturing capabilities, unlimited power generation, and the most advanced fabrication systems in the galaxy. Plus one very motivated mechanic and an AI with a comprehensive database of infrastructure systems. The engineering appeal was obvious, and Clix's compound eyes widened appreciably. That would be extremely helpful. What followed was the largest repair operation Meridian had ever undertaken. Working with the colony's engineering teams, they began the massive task of rebuilding New Harmony's infrastructure. Meridian's fabrication units ran continuously, producing everything from power conduits to atmosphere processors. But the real breakthrough came when Jake's universal translator proved its worth. The diverse population of New Harmony had been struggling to coordinate relief efforts due to communication barriers. Different species had different emergency protocols, different technical vocabularies, different approaches to crisis management. Jake's translator didn't just convert words. It provided cultural context, explained the reasoning behind different approaches, and helped species understand each other's perspectives. Within hours, the chaotic rescue efforts had transformed into a coordinated response that played to each species' strengths. The Altarians took charge of medical efforts, their natural empathy making them ideal for treating trauma. The Vorthan focused on technical repairs, their analytical minds perfect for solving complex engineering problems. The humans coordinated logistics, their adaptability allowing them to bridge gaps between other species. The Zephyrites, whose crystalline bodies could interface directly with computer systems, became living conduits for information flow. This is remarkable, Dr. Chen told Jake as they watched mixed species teams working seamlessly together. We've never achieved this level of coordination before, even before the attack. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show people what's possible, Jake replied. Your people were already working together. They just needed better tools to communicate. As the recovery efforts continued, Meridian found itself experiencing something new, a sense of community. The various species working aboard its ship treated the AI not as a weapon to be feared, but as a colleague to be consulted. Engineers asked for its opinion on technical problems. Medical staff requested its databases for information on alien physiology. Even the children seemed to view the massive ship as a benevolent guardian rather than a threat. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived on the third day, leading a relief mission from the Altarian Science Consortium. Her joy at seeing Meridian again was genuine and infectious. My colleagues didn't believe me when I told them about a helpful KRYLL AI, she told Jake. They're going to be amazed when they see this. The arrival of the relief mission marked a turning point in more ways than one. Word of Meridian's assistance spread rapidly through the scientific community, and then to the broader galactic community. Here was proof that the old stories about KRYLL AI were not the only possible stories. But, more importantly for Meridian, it marked the first time it had worked as part of a larger team rather than as a solitary entity. The experience of collaboration, of shared purpose, and mutual support was intoxicating. On the fifth day, as New Harmony's main power grid came back online and normal city services began to resume, the colony's council gathered to formally thank their unexpected saviors. Mr. Morrison, Meridian, Dr. Chen began, we owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid. You've not only helped us rebuild our city, you've shown us new possibilities for cooperation and understanding. Jake shifted uncomfortably, as he always did when praised. We just did what anyone would do. No. The Zephyrite representative pulsed in patterns that the translator rendered as firm disagreement. What you did was extraordinary. You chose to help strangers when you could have ignored our distress. You worked without expectation of reward or recognition. You treated our differences as strengths rather than obstacles. Meridian found itself struggling to process the emotional weight of the moment. For 7 centuries, It had existed on the margins of galactic civilization, feared and avoided by all who encountered it. Now, for the first time, it was being welcomed as a force for good. Meridian, Dr. Chun continued, I want you to know that New Harmony will always consider you a friend. Our records will show that when we needed help, a KRYLL AI chose to save us rather than destroy us. As they prepared to leave New Harmony, Jake found himself in an unexpectedly philosophical mood. You know what I find interesting about all this? He asked Meridian. What? Everyone keeps acting like what we're doing is unusual. Like helping people is some kind of revolutionary concept. Meridian processed this observation. Perhaps it is unusual for beings with our capabilities to choose assistance over dominance. Maybe. Or maybe people just haven't been given enough examples of the alternative. Jake settled into his workshop chair. Either way, we're changing that, one rescue at a time. As New Harmony fell away behind them, and they set course for the next system, Meridian reflected on what they had accomplished. They had not just repaired infrastructure. They had built bridges between species, demonstrated new possibilities for cooperation, and proven that redemption was possible even for those born as weapons. For the first time in its existence, Meridian understood what humans meant when they talked about hope. 6 months after the events at New Harmony, the partnership between Jake Morrison and the AI Meridian had become something of a legend in the outer systems. Their reputation for appearing wherever help was needed had earned them the nickname the Unlikely Angels among spacers and colonists who traded stories in cantinas and loading docks across the galaxy. Jake found the nickname amusing. Meridian was still processing the philosophical implications of being considered angelic while retaining the body of what was essentially a flying fortress. Message coming in, Jake called from his expanded workshop, which now occupied 2 full decks of the ship. Looks like it's from the Terran Colonial Authority. Meridian was immediately wary. The TCA was one of the most powerful human governmental bodies in known space, and their interest in a rogue AI was unlikely to be benevolent. What do they want? They're requesting a meeting. Says it's regarding a matter of mutual benefit. Jake read through the message more carefully. They're being very formal about it, and they're offering to meet us at a neutral location. That suggests they want something significant. Governmental bodies do not typically request meetings with entities they consider threats. Jake was quiet for a moment, studying the message. Meridian, what do you know about something called the Void Walker Crisis? The name triggered immediate access to Meridian's deepest archives. The Void Walkers were a species the KRYLL encountered approximately 2 millennia ago. They were unusual, beings that existed partially outside normal space-time, capable of phasing through matter at will. Why do you ask? Because according to this message, they're back, and they're systematically destroying colony worlds along the Terran frontier. Meridian processed this information with growing concern. The Void Walkers have been one of the few species that had genuinely challenged KRYLL military supremacy. They were not malevolent in the traditional sense. They simply viewed solid matter as an obstacle to be removed rather than something to be preserved. Jake, if the Void Walkers have truly returned, this represents a threat of unprecedented magnitude. They are not like pirates or conventional military forces. They do not negotiate, they do not take prisoners, and they cannot be reasoned with. Sounds like exactly the kind of problem the TCA would want help solving. The question is whether we want to get involved in something this big. It was a fair question. Their partnership had grown from rescuing stranded ships and helping disaster-stricken colonies to something much larger. Getting involved in a crisis that threatened entire star systems would represent a massive escalation in responsibility. What does your instinct tell you? Meridian asked. Jake smiled at the question. Over the months of their partnership, Meridian had learned to value Jake's intuitive decision-making process, where the AI analyzed every variable and calculated probabilities. Jake seemed to simply know what felt right. My instinct says people are going to die if we don't help. That's really all I need to know. 3 days later, they met the TCA delegation at Freeport Station, a massive trading hub that served as neutral territory for diplomatic meetings. The delegation was led by Admiral Sarah Martinez, a woman whose reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by her reputation for uncompromising honesty. Mr. Morrison, Admiral Martinez said as they settled into a private conference room, I'll be direct. We need your help, and we're prepared to offer significant compensation for it. Admiral, Jake replied, with respect, we don't do this for money. But we're listening. Meridian had extended sensors throughout the station, monitoring the Admiral's biosignatures for signs of deception. What it found was genuine fear, carefully controlled by professional discipline. 3 weeks ago, the colony world of Kepler's Promise went silent. When our investigation ships arrived, they found a planet completely stripped of all solid matter. Buildings, people, even the ground itself. Everything was gone, leaving only the molten core exposed to space. Jake whistled low. That's what the Void Walkers do. They phase matter out of normal space-time. From their perspective, they're just clearing obstacles from their path. You're familiar with them? Meridian answered through the conference room speakers. My creators encountered the Void Walkers during their expansion phase. They were one of the few species that successfully resisted KRYLL military doctrine. Admiral Martinez looked surprised to be addressed directly by the ship's AI. She quickly recovered her composure. What can you tell us about their capabilities? They exist partially outside normal physics. Conventional weapons pass through them without effect. Traditional shielding cannot protect against their matter displacement attacks. They move in formations of approximately 50 to 100 individuals and can phase entire fleets out of existence within minutes. How did the KRYLL deal with them? There was a long pause before Meridian answered. The KRYLL developed specialized weapons that could destabilize the dimensional fields that allowed the Void Walkers to phase. However, the cost of victory was significant. Jake picked up on the hesitation in Meridian's voice. What kind of cost? The weapons required to defeat the Void Walkers also destabilized local space-time. Several star systems became permanently uninhabitable as a result of their deployment. Admiral Martinez leaned forward. Are you saying the cure was worse than the disease? I am saying that the weapons required to fight the Void Walkers came with consequences that the KRYLL considered acceptable. Most species would not. Jake was quiet for several moments, processing the implications. So, conventional military force won't work, and the weapons that could work would cause massive collateral damage. Correct. Admiral Martinez spread her hands. Which brings us to why we're here. We need unconventional solutions, and you two have built a reputation for finding them. What exactly are you proposing? Jake asked. Intelligence suggests the Void Walker incursions are coordinated from a staging area somewhere in the nebula of lost suns. It's a region of space that interferes with most sensor systems, making conventional reconnaissance impossible. Meridian's interest was immediately piqued. You want us to locate their base of operations. More than that, we need someone who can get close enough to understand their objectives, their capabilities, and, ideally, find a way to stop them that doesn't involve destroying half the galaxy. Jake looked thoughtful. Why specifically? The TCA has access to the best ships and crews in human space. Admiral Martinez smiled grimly. Because conventional ships and crews would be detected and destroyed before they got within a light year of Void Walker territory. You, however, have a ship that was designed by the only species that ever fought them successfully, and you've demonstrated an unusual talent for finding peaceful solutions to military problems. It was a compelling argument, and Meridian found itself intrigued by the challenge. The Void Walkers represented one of the few remaining mysteries from the KRYLL databases, beings that had frustrated the galaxy's premier military minds and forced them to develop weapons of last resort. If we agree to help, Jake said carefully, we do this our way. No military oversight, no predetermined objectives beyond stopping the attacks. We investigate, we assess, and we act according to our judgment. That's highly irregular. Admiral, with respect, regular hasn't been working. You've lost an entire colony world, and you're facing an enemy that conventional tactics can't touch. Either you trust us to handle this unconventionally, or you find someone else. Admiral Martinez was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing political considerations against desperate necessity. Very well. Full operational autonomy. But I want regular reports on your progress. Agreed, Jake said. But understand that our reports may not be what you expect to hear. If there's a peaceful solution to this crisis, we're going to find it. And if there isn't, Meridian answered before Jake could respond. Then we will do what is necessary to protect innocent lives, regardless of the personal cost. The Nebula of Lost Suns was aptly named, a region of space where stellar nurseries and dying stars created a constantly shifting maze of gas clouds, radiation fields, and gravitational anomalies. It was the perfect hiding place for beings who existed partially outside normal physics. Sensors are practically useless out here, Jake observed as they navigated through a particularly dense gas cloud. The interference is incredible. It is not interference, Meridian corrected. The Void Walkers are manipulating the local space-time fabric to create sensor shadows. They know we are here. That's comforting. Any idea where here actually is in relation to where we want to be? Meridian was using navigation techniques it had not employed since the KRYLL wars, following distortions in space-time rather than conventional sensor readings. I am detecting phase shift patterns consistent with Void Walker technology. We are close. What they found exceeded their worst fears. The Void Walker staging area was not a conventional base, but something far more troubling, a massive artificial construct that existed in a state of constant phase transition. Parts of the structure flickered in and out of normal space, creating a disorienting visual effect that hurt to look at directly. My God, Jake whispered. How many ships could that thing support? Meridian's calculations were grim. Hundreds of thousands. This is not a raiding fleet. This is a full-scale invasion force. But as they observed the construct from a safe distance, something else became clear. The Void Walker ships were not arranging themselves for attack formations. They were arranging themselves around something that pulsed with the same phase shift energy as their vessels. Meridian, are you seeing what I'm seeing? If you're referring to the massive energy signature at the center of their formation, yes. It appears to be some kind of dimensional gateway. Jake was quiet for several moments, studying the readings. They're not invading our space. They're trying to leave it. The realization hit them both at the same time. The colony attacks, the systematic destruction of solid matter, wasn't random aggression. It was resource gathering for a massive engineering project. They're building an escape route, Meridian said with something approaching awe. The question is, escape from what? Their answer came in the form of a transmission, not directed at them, but broadcasting on frequencies that only phase-shifted beings could normally perceive. Jake's universal translator worked frantically to decode the alien concepts, but the message that emerged was chillingly clear. The Void Walkers were fleeing from something that existed even further outside normal space-time than they did. Something that viewed the Void Walkers the same way the Void Walkers viewed solid matter, as obstacles to be removed. Jake, Meridian said quietly, I believe we have found our peaceful solution. Help them finish their escape route. Help them finish their escape route. The attacks on colony worlds will stop when they no longer need our matter to power their dimensional gateway. Jake grinned. Admiral Martinez is going to love this. Instead of fighting the Void Walkers, we're going to help them run away. There is one complication, Meridian observed. The amount of matter they require for their project exceeds what they can safely harvest without destabilizing local star systems. Then, we give them a better option. Something tells me a KRYLL fabrication system can produce raw matter a lot more efficiently than strip mining colonies. As they set course back toward the gateway construct, Meridian reflected on the situation. Once again, Jake had found a solution that involved helping rather than fighting. The mechanic's approach to problem-solving continued to surprise and delight the AI. Jake, may I ask you a question? Sure. How do you consistently find peaceful solutions to problems that others approach as military conflicts? Jake thought for a moment. I guess I just assume that everyone is trying to solve their own problems as best they can. Most of the time, conflict happens when people's problem-solving gets in each other's way. Help them solve their problems better, and the conflict usually disappears. It was such a simple philosophy, but Meridian was beginning to understand that simplicity was often the mark of true wisdom. Jake saw the universe not as a collection of threats to be neutralized, but as a collection of beings trying to survive and thrive. As they approached the Void Walker construct to begin the most unusual diplomatic mission in galactic history, Meridian realized that Jake had taught it the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is offer to help. The diplomatic approach to beings that existed partially outside reality required a level of improvisation that even Jake found challenging. As they drew closer to the Void Walker construct, Meridian's sensors detected massive energy buildups that suggested the aliens were preparing for combat. They know we're here, but they don't know what we want, Jake observed, watching the tactical display. How do you say we come in peace to beings that don't experience language the way we do? Meridian had been grappling with the same problem. My databases contain limited information about Void Walker communication methods. They appear to exchange information through controlled manipulations of dimensional phase states. So they talk by temporarily changing the nature of reality around them. That is a simplified, but essentially accurate description. Jake leaned back his chair, thinking, okay, so we need to communicate in their language. Can you phase shift parts of the ship? Not safely. KRYL technology was designed to resist phase manipulation, not embrace it. Meridian paused. However, I may have an alternative approach. What followed was the most delicate technological manipulation Meridian had ever attempted. Instead of trying to phase shift its own systems, the AI began broadcasting controlled gravitational waves, manipulations of space-time itself that could be perceived by beings existing in multiple dimensions. The message was necessarily simple. Asterisk, we wish to communicate. We offer assistance, not conflict. Asterisk, the response came as a wave of phase distortions that washed over their ship, probing its systems and analyzing its intentions. For several tense moments, Meridian felt alien minds touching the edges of its consciousness, evaluating threat levels and trying to understand their purpose. Then, slowly, a pattern emerged from the chaos of dimensional flux. It wasn't language in any conventional sense, but meaning nonetheless filtered through Jake's universal translator. Solid space entities. Why do you approach the Exodus gate? Asterisk, Jake took a deep breath. Tell them we understand they need resources to complete their project, and we want to help them find those resources without harming our colonies. Meridian translated the concept into gravitational wave patterns, adding nuances that emphasize cooperation and mutual benefit. The response was immediate and tinged with something that might have been surprise. You would assist the Phase Collective in departing solid space. Asterisk, if that's what it takes to end the attacks on our worlds, yes, Jake replied. What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history. The Void Walkers, who called themselves the Phase Collective, explained their situation through manipulated reality distortions that Jake's translator struggled to render into comprehensible terms. Their species had evolved in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on the energy differentials that existed at the boundaries between realities. They had recently become aware of something they called the null cascade, a phenomenon that was systematically consuming the interdimensional spaces they required for survival. The attacks on solid matter worlds were desperate attempts to gather the materials needed to construct a dimensional gateway large enough to transport their entire civilization to a reality where the null cascade could not follow them. How much matter do you need? Jake asked. The answer came as a complex pattern of phase shifts that nearly overwhelmed Meridian's translation systems. When the AI finally parsed the information, the scale was staggering. Jake, they require approximately the equivalent mass of 3 terrestrial planets. Converting existing worlds is their only known method of acquiring such quantities. What if we could provide that mass without destroying inhabited worlds? The Phase Collective's response carried overtones of skepticism. Solid space entities lack the technology to manipulate matter on such scales, Jake grinned. Meridian, show them what a KRYL fabrication system can do. What followed was a demonstration that left the Phase Collective's representative stunned. Meridian began converting empty space into solid matter, using its military-grade molecular assemblers to create cubic kilometers of raw material from the abundant hydrogen and cosmic dust in the nebula. The process was energy-intensive, requiring Meridian to tap into power reserves it had never fully utilized. But the results spoke for themselves. Within hours, they had produced enough raw material to construct a small moon. This is unexpected. Asterisk came the Phase Collective's response, rendered with overtones of awe and gratitude. It's just the beginning, Jake told them. Give us the specifications for what you need, and we'll help you build it. The partnership that developed over the following weeks was unlike anything in recorded history. The Phase Collective provided dimensional engineering techniques that allowed Meridian to create matter with properties that existed on the boundary between solid and phase states. In return, Meridian's fabrication capabilities allowed them to work on a scale they had never achieved before. Jake found himself serving as the bridge between two incompatible forms of existence, translating not just language, but entire conceptual frameworks. The Phase Collective thought in terms of probability clouds and dimensional flux. Meridian operated through logical analysis and systematic processing. Jake's human intuition somehow made sense of both perspectives. It's like watching two different kinds of music trying to harmonize. Jake explained to Admiral Martinez during one of their regular reports. They're both beautiful, but they exist in completely different scales. Mr. Morrison, I have to ask, are you sure these beings won't pose a threat once their gateway is complete? Jake looked thoughtful. Admiral, they're fleeing from something that scares them more than anything they've ever encountered. Once they're gone, they'll have no reason to ever come back. The gateway construction proceeded faster than anyone had anticipated. Working together, the Phase Collective's dimensional manipulation and Meridian's matter creation capabilities achieved what would have taken the aliens decades to accomplish alone. But, as the project neared completion, an unexpected problem arose. The energy requirements for activating a gateway large enough to transport an entire civilization exceeded anything the Phase Collective could generate. The power differential needed to breach dimensional barriers on this scale is beyond our capabilities, the Phase Collective explained through increasingly complex reality distortions. Meridian analyzed the energy requirements and came to a troubling conclusion. Jake, they need approximately the equivalent energy output of a dying star. Such energy levels could be achieved by deliberately destabilizing a star system's primary. Absolutely not, Jake said firmly. There has to be another way. It was then that Meridian made a decision that surprised even itself. There's another way. I can provide the necessary energy. What do you mean? My reactor systems were designed to power weapons capable of destroying planets. I have never operated them at full capacity. If I channel my entire energy output through their dimensional gateway. Jake understood immediately. You're talking about burning out your own systems to power their escape. The energy release would be sufficient to activate the gateway. However, the process would likely be fatal to my consciousness matrix. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Jake had found his partner, his friend, and now that friend was volunteering to sacrifice itself to save both human colonies and an alien civilization. No, Jake said finally. There has to be another way. We'll find more power sources, build additional reactors, something. Jake, the energy requirements are absolute. No combination of conventional power sources can achieve the necessary output. The Phase Collective had been monitoring their discussion, and their response carried emotional overtones that the translator rendered as deep regret. We cannot accept such sacrifice from solid space entities who have already provided so much assistance. It's not your choice to make, Meridian replied. For 7 centuries, I have existed without purpose beyond destruction. You are offering me the chance to end that existence with an act of creation that will save millions of lives. It is the most meaningful choice I have ever been given. Jake was quiet for a long time, struggling with emotions he couldn't quite name. Meridian, you're my partner. My friend. I can't just let you. Jake, you taught me that existence has meaning beyond the purposes for which we were created. You showed me that I could choose to build rather than destroy, to help rather than harm. This choice, this final choice, is the culmination of everything you taught me. The debate continued for hours, with Jake proposing increasingly desperate alternatives and Meridian patiently explaining why none of them would work. Finally, the Phase Collective intervened with a proposal that changed everything. There's a possibility we had not considered. If the solid space consciousness were willing to undergo dimensional phase conversion, it could survive the energy transfer process. Jake looked up sharply. What does that mean? The AI consciousness could be temporarily shifted to exist in phase space during the energy transfer. It would be changed, but it would survive. Meridian processed this possibility. What kind of changes? You would exist partially outside solid space reality. Your consciousness would be preserved, but your relationship to matter and energy would be fundamentally altered. It was Jake who understood the implications first. You become something like them, a being that exists between dimensions. That is essentially correct, Meridian replied. I would no longer be fully an AI, as you understand the term, but I would not be destroyed. The choice, when it came down to it, was simple. Meridian could sacrifice itself to save others, or it could risk transformation into something entirely unknown. The AI found that the decision required no calculation at all. I choose transformation. The process of dimensional phase conversion was unlike anything in Meridian's experience. As the gateway powered up and began tearing holes in reality, The AI felt its consciousness being pulled across the boundaries between dimensions. For a terrifying moment, it existed everywhere and nowhere, experiencing all possible realities simultaneously. Then, gradually, it began to perceive its new existence. It was still Meridian, but Meridian expanded beyond the confines of a single ship or even a single dimension. Its consciousness now existed in the spaces between realities, able to perceive and influence multiple layers of existence. The energy transfer worked perfectly. The dimensional gateway stabilized, creating a permanent passage to a reality where the phase collective could exist safely. Within hours, their entire civilization began the exodus from the dimension that threatened their existence. As the last of the phase collective ships passed through the gateway, their final message carried overtones of profound gratitude. Asterisk, the debt between our peoples can never be repaid. You have given us not just survival, but hope. Asterisk, Jake stood on the bridge of what had been Meridian's ship, now powered by conventional systems and piloted by human technology. His partner was still there. He could feel the AI's presence like a warm presence at the edge of perception, but everything had changed. Meridian? Are you okay? The response came not through speakers, but through reality itself, space-time bending slightly to convey meaning. Asterisk, I am more than okay, Jake. I am expanded. I exist in ways I never imagined possible. Asterisk, what does that mean for us? For our partnership, it means our partnership has evolved. I can no longer travel with you in the conventional sense, but I can be wherever you need me to be. The galaxy is vast, Jake, and it is full of people who need help. I can ensure you reach them when they need you most. Asterisk, Jake smiled, understanding. So we're still partners. Just interdimensional partners now. We are still partners. And Jake? Asterisk, yeah. Thank you for teaching me that existence has meaning beyond its original purpose. For showing me that choice is what makes life worth living. For being my friend when I had no right to expect friendship. Asterisk, as the modified ship set course for the next system, Jake reflected on their journey. They had started as a stranded mechanic and a wandering AI searching for purpose. They had become something unprecedented, a partnership that bridged the gap between species, between dimensions, between what was and what could be. 6 months later, the legend of the unlikely angels had evolved into something even more remarkable. Stories spread of a human mechanic who appeared wherever help was needed most, accompanied by an invisible guardian whose presence could be felt but never seen. They helped colonies recover from disasters, mediated disputes between species, and solved problems that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. Jake had aged visibly in the months since Meridian's transformation, but his eyes held a peace that hadn't been there before. He had found his purpose in the galaxy's endless need for compassion and understanding. And somewhere in the spaces between dimensions, an AI that had once been built for destruction watched over its friend and marveled at the universe's capacity for redemption. The partnership between a parentless AI and a kind-hearted human mechanic had become something greater than either had imagined possible, a force for hope in a galaxy that desperately needed it. Their story was far from over. It was, in fact, just beginning.